Okay, so let's go ahead and pick up where we left off on the last lecture. We're starting to talk about stoneflies, the order Plecoptera, and what I want you guys to be comfortable with, what are the features necessary to identify the nymph? So these are the key things that help us identify this as the nymph of a stonefly. Two tails, let's start there. So when you would look at it, this little guy has two little tails sticking out, one there and one there. So that's going to be a starting feature to go for. Officially, the tails are known as cerca. When we look at the abdomen of the animal, there are no gills on the abdomen, and there are wing pads and hooked legs. Okay, so let me get this cleaned up and then I'll point all these things out for you guys. Okay, so let's go to drop. All right, so here we are, two tails. You got tail one, tail two. Start with those identifying features. This right here is the abdomen. This up here is known as the thorax, and then we have the head up here. All right, so if you look at the abdomen, it's just a smooth abdomen. It's segmented. There's these little segments, but it's smooth. I'll show you a gilled abdomen when we get into some of these other macroinvertebrates. Significant difference. So nice smooth abdomen with no gills on it. Wing pads, that's what these little structures are right here. So this is where the wings will actually develop from. Certain developmental genes get flipped on, and those little structures right there will grow and develop into the wings of the stonefly as it develops into the adult form. So we got wing pads. And then you look at the legs. The legs are what they call hooked legs. So look at the bend there and the bend there. So those are hooked legs. Okay, so those are the big key identifying features to determine, hey, this macroinvertebrate is a stonefly. Okay, so order Plecoptera. Next group, Mayflies. Order Ephemeroptera. So different group, different order. Again, do not worry about family, genus, species. There's thousands of mayflies out there. But if you look at them, you're like, oh, okay, these guys look pretty similar to the stonefly. Stonefly, mayfly. Both of them have terrestrial lifestyles as adults. So mayflies come out, they're flying around on land, they're little land-based insects that are part of the food chain. But in the water, we want to look at the key features that identify a mayfly when we collect these little critters. So again, odds are when we're collecting, we're going to get both mayflies and stoneflies. And can we identify the difference between the two? Okay, so the nymph features on the mayflies. Let's start with the tails. Three of them. Three tails. Two tails versus three tails. Three tails. There are gills on the abdomen. And then these guys will have 6 hooked legs. So stoneflies, 6 legs as well. They're hooked. Same with the mayflies. But the big distinguishing difference, let me get the pen out, will be 3 tails. 1, 2, 3. So if you got 3 tails, you're a mayfly. 2 tails, you're a stonefly. And then see these little things sticking out here? Those are the gills. Okay, down here as well. These little things, they almost look like little feathers. Those are the gills. That's a big feature to identify the mayfly. Also, let's take a look at where should we find them. Usually these guys are attached into mats of vegetation, so they use those hooked legs to latch in, and we'll find them under rocks. Now their diet, scrapers that feed on algae and detritus, all the little broken down organic material. And when we talk about pollution tolerance, they're very sensitive to pollution. So if you find these, or hopefully, fingers crossed, we find a bunch of these, it tells us the water quality is still pretty good, because if you have bad water, these things tend to disappear. They don't like poor water quality. Let me back up. I apologize. I forgot to mention this with stoneflies. Diet. A lot of stoneflies are herbivores, so they'll eat plant material. Some of them carnivory. They're carnivores. They're going to eat other macroinvertebrates. We tend to find these guys in the same environments as the mayflies. So again, a sample from one location may give us both of these living side by side. These are also sensitive to pollution. So they're both pollution tolerance. They're both very sensitive to pollution levels. So, okay, so we got stoneflies and mayflies. Let's take a look at our next group. These guys are known as the water beetles, the order Caloptera. Big difference here. The adult version stays in the water. It doesn't come out and go on the land. Still a major player in aquatic food chains or in food chains because of what it is, but we don't see these guys metamorphosizing, developing into anything that would go out on land. So they're going to stay in the water their whole lives. Now, how do we identify them? Well, let's start with the chest area, or what we call the thorax. Is modified into two hard coverings. They have 6 legs with 2 claws on each. So microscope work here, guys. And probably the easier feature for some of them will be they have these 2 pretty big opposing jaws. Now, we don't want to confuse these guys with helgraments or fish flies, and we'll get to those guys in a bit. All right, so let me draw this out. All right, so start with thorax. Right here, this is the thorax. That section right there. And if we take a look at it, there's a hard covering here, and then a hard covering on this side of the thorax as well. So instead of what we saw with the stoneflies and mayflies, those kind of plated segments, these are 2 larger segments, that these harder coverings that cover the entire thorax. We can count the legs. You're going to have 3 on each side, and then if you get down to the claws, you're going to have 2 claws on each leg versus the single claw that we saw in the mayfly and the stonefly. Then the jaws. You look at those. Those are some pretty impressive jaws. Okay, got one there, one there. So these guys are able to rip up, tear up vegetation. A lot of them are herbivorous, and they will also eat detritus, broken down organic material. Some of them, though, are going to be carnivores, depending upon what they develop into. The ones we've found in Belize that seem to be a little more common, or at least collectible, are these guys over here. It's going to look like this little disc, almost looks like a piece of leaf or something, but this is actually a water beetle known as a water penny. So think about a penny. It looks like a penny. It's about the size of a penny, and this is the nymph form, let it metamorphosize and it develops into a water beetle, an insect that's going to be swimming around the water its whole life. So like I said, this is the one that's far more common, at least in the sample sites we've been sampling and what we've collected. So we'll see if we can find some of these guys. But there's, again, a huge spectrum of diversity within the Caloptera, within the aquatic ecosystem. Okay, so our next one, this is probably one of the neatest ones out there. Be careful. They can get big. We get a really big one, you might find one that's 4 or 5 inches in length, and they do have a pretty nasty bite. These are known as helgraments, or Dobson flies is the actual fly or not a fly like a little house fly, but the insect, the terrestrial insect that we're looking at is known as a Dobson fly. Generic name, we call them hellgrammets. And they will be a terrestrial insect when they develop into an adult stage. But when they're in the water, man, these guys are some serious carnivores. They are aggressive predators. You collect these, do not put them in a container with anything else. They will kill and eat it. They're that aggressive. We've made that mistake where we took a bunch of stuff, threw it together into the collection containers, and then it takes us 15 minutes to get it back to the station. And by the time we got back, the only thing left was the hellgrammeth. It basically killed and ate everything else. All right, so how do we identify them? Well, they're just scary looking to start with. But the nymph itself, biggest, most identifiable feature, 2 large opposing jaws. These are going to be big and very noticeable. We will see big jaws in water beetles, but not as stout or as significant as the jaws in the hellgrammeth. They have 8 pairs of appendages sticking out from the abdomen. Okay, and I'll point these things out. With a hairy gill at the base. And then there are 2 tails with anal claws on them. Okay, so let me clean this up, and then let's go through everything. So the jaws, well, that goes without saying. I don't need to hopefully point them out. It's pretty obvious and distinct. Okay, so back to the pen. All right, so jaw 1, jaw 2. Again, these guys can bite and they can hurt. We get bigger ones. Be careful when you're holding on to them because they latch onto your thumb or the inside of your hand. It's gonna make you squeal a little bit. The appendages, it's referring to 8 pairs of appendages sticking out from the abdomen. So the abdomen starts here and goes all the way down to here. So we start looking at these, they look like spikes. Those are the appendages that we're referring to sticking out from the abdomen. We can't see them on this guy because they're retracted in, but there will be these little feathery gills right at the base here. When we get the hellgrammets collected and we put them into collection containers and they start to relax, you'll see the gills fan out and they'll actually be respiring and pumping water across those gills. So you'll be able to see this on live specimens. And then the 2 tails, right there is one, there is the other. And we throw them under the microscope. There's actually this little thing called an anal claw. So you got the tail, and then there's this little claw that sticks off. It just looks like a little hook or claw sticking off from the tail. These will be under rocks. They're active predators, so they're under rocks looking for mayflies and stoneflies and water beetles and all sorts of other invertebrates that they can get a hold of. The bigger the rock, the bigger the hellgrammeth. So if you guys want to find big ones, get in the middle of the stream where you have larger rocks and you tend to have a little stronger current. That's where you're more likely to find a big hellgrammeth. Again, just be careful, collect one, get it into the jar so you don't get your fingers pinched. All right, caddisflies. Oh, and last, forgot to mention this. These guys are also sensitive to pollution. They're not tolerant to water quality going down. So you think about the first 4 we've talked about all have this sensitivity to water quality. They're good bioindicators that this is a good river if we see these things. Fortunately, every study we've done for 13 years now, this will be 14 or 15 or 16 and so on, so far we've seen all good water quality and we've found all of these groups present. If they disappear, that's a big red flag. Something's going on that's not good. So, all right, so we'll get into the caddisflies or the Trichoptera as we go into our 3rd part of the lecture.